"19 months of bloody conflict and still no signs of peace in Syria." The ruthless battle being waged between insurgents from the Free Syrian Army and loyalist forces for more than 2 months in Aleppo has been steadily worsening. A Euronews team made it into Syria's second city and commercial hub. In the north, the access points are limited and unreliable. To get there, we headed for the Kilis border in southern Turkey. It is the only way to get into the village of Azaz on the other side of the frontier, under rebel control since mid-July. In the distance, Syria. Aleppo is less than 80 kilometers away. On arrival, what hits us immediately is the level of destruction and chaos. It's impossible to say how many people are still here. Many neighborhoods are inaccessible. The city has been quite literally cut in half. The areas held by rebels are the only places open to journalists, and they are under constant bombardment. At one time the mosques were spared, but now they too lie in ruins. Even hospitals are now fair game for destruction. At Dar al-Shifa, renamed the hospital for free men, the wounded arrive continuously. 7 doctors assisted by 10 nurses and many volunteers are responsible for their care. The real problem here is not lack of medication, but shortage of staff.
Most of war injury is from civilian, about 80% from injury is civilian, and the rest is from Free Syrian Army.
Emergency treatment is given as quickly as possible. While doctors try to rehydrate this young girl, a fighter is brought in by his comrades returning from combat in the neighboring district of Arkub. But it was too late. Ibrahim was dead on arrival.
We will win against Bashar the dog by the will of God. We may not have weapons like the regime with its air force. Our weapons are so simple. But despite of this, we are winning. Every day we are making progress. Every martyr who is sacrificed is replaced by 100 more.
As the medical staff struggle to save as many as they can, trails of blood line the corridors. Many of those who choose to leave are reluctant to head for the Turkish border as they fear they'll be turned away. This man and his family, who do not wish to be identified, head for the airport area, still held by the regime. Bombs are still falling as they leave the city. In Hanano and Tariq al-Bab neighborhoods, the threat comes mainly from the sky. Combat aircraft and helicopters constantly circle like vultures over the rubble. But now everyone seems to be used to the danger. A Russian-made MiG has dropped a bomb just a few hundred meters away. On the roads out of Aleppo, we meet lots of people who are trying to make it to the Turkish border, where their families are waiting for them. They take only the bare necessities. Why are you fleeing Aleppo?
We had to leave very quickly because of the bombs that didn't stop falling. It was really scary. Everything was destroyed. I saw children die, crushed by the weight of the buildings that collapsed on them.
We agreed with Ahmed and his family to meet up later. The city of Mareya is a few kilometers away. Here we can see the result of several months of relentless airstrikes. Suspecting the rebels were using one of the schools as a base, the regular army blew it to smithereens. There could have been children inside.
That's Bashar al-Assad's reforms, bombing schools. Where are the weapons? Where is the Free Army? There's nobody here. He also wants to kill our children and destroy our schools? Fine, destroy everything if you want. We don't care. What's it all for? Even during the world wars, schools were spared. What are they looking for? Terrorists? There's nobody here. The official media claim the gangs hide here, that weapons are stored in the schools. I challenge Assad's army to find a single drop of blood here. If there was anyone here, we'd see blood. Look at the ground.
Not far from there, we meet Abu Hassan and Fatma. From the outset, the couple took part in the revolt against the regime. Their names are now on the blacklist. The owner of a clothes shop, Fatma would regularly commute between her village and Aleppo. Abu Hassan worked in the funeral business. He saw the first casualties of the conflict.
Their heads were split in two with an axe. After 13 days, it just stank. The skulls were filled with worms. We buried them all, and then we were brought 5 other bodies. Their remains were impossible to identify, even by their own families.
This is our destiny with this gang of murderers. I swear we will not give up till our last breath. We will kick him and his gang out. And if we will live, if God wills it, with liberty and security, and you will see how Syria will recover after this pig.
These 2 young deserters said they had not taken part in the fighting. One was imprisoned for several months before being liberated by the rebels.
I deserted because we were asked to kill people, and I refused. We weren't allowed to leave our unit. For several months, we had no outside contact, not even with our own families.
We find Ahmed and his family in Tel Rafat, halfway between Aleppo and Azaz. To avoid detection, they change vehicle. We join them as they approach the Turkish border.
When I was in my house, I slept in the corridor just next to the door, and my son slept behind me, one behind the other. We were so afraid that I even slept wearing my veil in case I died. I didn't want to offend God, you know. For me, it would be forbidden.
Back to Aleppo. In the northeast of the city, the thunder of bombs resembles the pneumatic drills used to free survivors from the rubble. It's here in a hidden location that we find Abdelkader El-Haji, the 32-year-old leader of the Tawhid Brigade, the largest component of the FSA, which boasts no fewer than 6,000 fighters. He says the massacres reported by NGOs are attributable only to the regime.
The only ones committing massacres are the soldiers of the regular army, the regime. There is a legislative council of the FSA, and only that decides the prisoner's fate. But the regular army commits atrocities and summary executions in the streets openly for all to see.
It's necessary to maintain morale. With people's fate seemingly left to chance, more and more are turning towards religion. While these fighters stand guard, a group of civilians is coordinating operations. The presence of our cameras bothers some of them, so it's impossible to film. On the roof of the building, we meet Mariam, a journalist who lives in the government area and supports the insurgency.
In general, people are afraid of death, but this revolution is so that people can live fairly. We hope not to die, but we are always afraid of death.
Back at the hospital, where we'd been that very morning, 2 shells have just struck. It's difficult not to fall into some form of fatalism. Having escaped the worst, we feel it wasn't yet our time. We were forced to leave Aleppo that day. Surprised by the level of violence, we decided to get out ahead of schedule. When we arrived at the Turkish border, Ahmed found his wife, who'd fled 3 weeks earlier with their children. They're obviously happy to see each other, but peace is still some way away. Unable to cope with the flood of refugees, Turkey temporarily restricts access to the camp of Kilis.
Turkey refused to let us cross the border. We've been stuck here near the border for 20 days. We're living in the street. There's no food, no water to wash, and no electricity. There's a lot of illness caused by that, but we have no choice. What can we do? Go back to Aleppo? The city's being bombed with aircraft, so only God can help us.
Obama should do something. He must force out the tyrant. We've asked for a no-fly zone for planes and missiles and for NATO to bomb our country. Is this child a terrorist to you? Why do they force us to flee our country, to be treated as outcasts by our Arab brothers? Nobody wants us on one side or the other. We've abandoned our homes, our villages, our families. Where can we go now?
Stranded, with nowhere to go, for now they can only hope this nightmare will end.